Good morning. Good morning. September the 9th, 2020. I'm Elizabeth, and this is supposed to be the Dream Big Today Bible study. On August the 31st, I went and changed the name to the Dream Big Today page. They accepted it. I got a message that said it would take 7 days. I went out on the 7th and it hadn't changed. So I go in to try to figure it out. And needless to say, it's still showing Elizabeth Sharon Ann. So I thought, well, I'll go in and try to change it again. And now it says it won't accept that name. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. But we're not going to give up one way or another. We're going to become the Dream Big Today page. So that's how come it hasn't changed. Thought I'd give you all a quick update. This is where we do our 1-year daily Bible together. Excited to do this every single morning. It's been nice to be back consistent for a while. That's keep reminding myself back in the good old days before I had a team that would step in and help me. There was many summers I just had to shut down for the summer because my travel schedule with work. So I'd stop about May and then pick it back up about mid-August, I think. So I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. Debbie fills in for me, Michelle, Lori. We got a couple of others that stepped up and said that they will. We are going to expand it to do a noontime. It'll be a little bit different because we're going to pick just one topic of the day's reading to talk about at noontime when we get that started. So, and we're starting a lot of new exciting things here in Skiatook, Oklahoma. We're going to have Dream Big Today Skiatook. I'm going to start here in my hometown doing a once a month ladies luncheon. We used to do that. Cassie Gilman was responsible for getting that started for us. Golly, that would be 2010, 11, and 12 probably. We did local once a month lady meetings. So we're going to start with Skiatook, and the Lord directs and the vision is correct. We'll probably add a few of the surrounding towns as well, but looking forward to that. And then we will culminate that with a 1-day Dream Big Today conference on a Saturday once a year. So going to be spending my time over the next several weeks visiting local pastors, getting the word out. So if you guys would be praying for us on that expansion, excited about that. Our couples Dream Big Today retreats are expanding as well. We have an event coming up that will include couples. It's going to include Dream Big Today, Dream Big Girls, also November the 4th and 5th here locally. We've got folks staying in my home, and a good friend of mine's opening her home. So trying not to make anybody have to have hotel rooms, but going to have a 2-day event in November. October 7th through the 9th is our next fall Dream Big Girls retreat. That's at Canyon Crossing in Sand Springs. And then we've got a couple of churches, I think, that's going to expand and have us do Dream Big retreats for their church. So if you guys have a ladies ministry at your church or would like to have a ladies ministry at your church, our team will travel and bring the Dream Big Today retreat to your church. Jan and Nunley's church did that 3 years ago. I guess it'll be 4 years coming up this January. They were just at a time when they felt like they needed some cohesiveness, and we went up and did a Dream Big Girls retreat for them, and they opted to continue it every year. So we'll be doing our 4th annual retreat with that church and the surrounding area girls. The idea is that is an outreach for the local church. We always believe strongly in local membership of a church to have a local church family. So anyway, that's what's on the agenda for Dream Big Today Ministries. So that's what you support when you give to this ministry, on top of giving away Bibles. We're still giving away Bibles. We ship out Bibles all over the place, and happy to do that. Blessed to do that. I'm going to be putting it on our website and asking folks to donate for some cots. We're going to try to expand the scholarship opportunity for our events so that we have our own cots. Jana has her ministry, Jana Nunley's ministry has always provided cots for us. And I'm so grateful for that. And but it's a lot of work for her. She loads those up oftentimes in one of her horse trailers. She will load up. She has to clean it out, of course, to begin with, and then she loads those all up, and it's a lot of work for her. So we're going to take donations for cots, so that we've got cots available for folks maybe that finances is a struggle for them to come to our events. And I'm looking forward to being able to do that. I'm looking forward to soon being able to have our first Dream Big retreat that is totally paid for by the ministry. Looking forward to that. Believe that that's God's heart. Bless those that don't have the funds to come themselves. So anyway, we're on Isaiah chapter 3, verses 1 through chapter 5, verse 30. And, you know, Isaiah, Mary pointed this out to us. Always happy to have my stepmom on with us. And she reminded us yesterday that Isaiah is in two parts. The early chapters shows the judgment for turning away from God. We're in the middle of that. The later chapters is all about God's faithfulness. A few years ago, I mentioned that there's 4 ways that we can read Isaiah. We can read it for the historical text that it is. We can read it for the prophecy to Israel that it is, the prophecy for today, for the church today. We can read it for today's events, the things that are happening today. And then I can read it for my life today. And I'm going to bring up something today that's a little bit of the last 2. I want to go to Isaiah chapter 3, verse 4. And obviously, God's doing a work in my heart about my tongue once again. You guys that have been with me several years, we've been doing these recorded videos now, I think 8 or 9 years. And those that have been with me for a long time know that God continually deals with me about the words I speak. Continually. He doesn't let up on me. I've still got work to do. I'm a work in progress. So it's not a surprise to you. I have been in that school of correction for a long time, but it's a school of love, that's for sure. And I want it. I desire it. I want to do better. I want to get out of the way and allow God to flow better. And when God's flowing through me, I'm doing better. If that makes sense. I used to think I had to do it. And that's probably why this school of correction has had to last so long, because I kept thinking I had to do it. But really all I have to do is submit and allow God to renew my mind, because the words that comes out of my mouth is a reflection of what's in my heart. So having said that, I'm going to go to verse 4. I will make boys their leaders and toddlers their rulers. People will oppress each other, man against man, neighbor against neighbor. Young people will insult their elders, and vulgar people will sneer at the honorable. And as I continue through, because we're still in the section in Isaiah that God is pointing out the judgment against the people that turned away from God. And we get a strong sense of right and wrong from reading these scriptures. These aren't fun things to read about all their sins. And if we're not careful, we have a tendency as we read them to go, oh, can you believe they? Well, can you believe they? Well, isn't it awful how bad they were? No wonder God had to do something drastic. I mean, if we're not careful, but remember I said that there's 4 different ways we can read these scriptures. For the historical text and prophecy it is to God's people, God's church, the historical prophecy to Israel, and then the historical word to God's people, the church. But then it's also can be read and you can correlate it to today's events. And I certainly certainly can correlate it to my life. And as I read through yesterday's reading, today's reading, and I read certain things, you know, certain things I've been guilty of, certain things that maybe I wasn't guilty of, but had I not changed my ways and decided to follow Jesus again, I would have been right there with them. There's nothing new under the sun. Had a sweet lady this morning send me a text this morning and said, chapter 3 reminds me of today. And she's right. It does. It reminds me of today. I mean, I just had conversations with somebody this week about how the kids insult the elders, the kids insult their moms or their dads. They insult grandmas and grandpas. And this got me to thinking, and I'll just use myself as an example. I think back over my life, when you reach a certain age, you get that benefit of kind of stepping back from your life. And there's an old saying that says hindsight's 20/20. That means that we can look back and see things perfectly, but while we were in the middle of it, we're not seeing it at all. Well, that's very true of me. And, I have a tendency, if I'm not careful, to get into that little judgmental mode, and I look around and I see this group of teenagers or even these group of grade schoolers, and I hear the words they're speaking about grandmas and grandpas. And then that causes me to look up and see what the parents are speaking about their own parents. And oh my goodness, it dawned on me. My first marriage, I married a man that had 2 children, and I become an instant stepmom. And through the years, I was very bothered by the stigma of the wicked stepmother. It still exists today. I mean, almost immediately when somebody says they have a stepmother, it's, oh, I feel sorry for you. Not all stepmothers are wicked.
Nope.
But there's a stigma about it. But you know what? This morning, what really hit me is that as we grow up, when we are young, when we're first born into toddlerhood, we're so dependent on our moms and dads. I mean, we can't even live without them. We're dependent on them, of course, for food, shelter, clothing, the basic necessities of life that we can't live without. And we develop a bond. And I'm going to talk about the healthy things because we all know there's exceptions, and there's horrible exceptions. I really hope I'm not going to talk about the extremes today, but we talk about, as children and growing up as kids, we think our mom and dads are perfect. We absolutely think they're perfect. We think they hung the moon. We think that they don't make mistakes. They know it all. And then we move into that phase where we start questioning and doubting. And then we move into a phase, probably sometime early teens. And actually, if you ever study psychology, they've got this down to an art that they can literally give you the age span for these things I'm talking about, where all of a sudden we see the faults of our parents. And oftentimes that can cause us to be disillusioned. It was like, oh my goodness, there's hypocrisy in that. I mean, that old saying, don't do as I do, do as I say do. We see our parents living in a way that we want to tell them, oh, I see how it is. Don't do as I do, just do as I say do. And that's sad, but it's a reality. We live and are born into a fallen world. And so along about that time, the conversation from our mouths turns from dad's my hero, mom is the greatest thing I've ever known in my life, to all of a sudden it's criticism. And it's, well, she won't let me do this. Well, he, man, I was only 5 minutes late for my curfew and my dad made me go build a fence. And then the next thing you know, it seems to me, now this is just my opinion, it seems to me that once we reach that level, without the renewing of our minds, without the training that we get in Sunday school, that we get in church, that we get in local Bible studies, that we get when we are amongst uh, like-minded believers, because the church will teach us to honor our mother and father, and it does not say we honor our father and our mother when they're the perfect parents. It doesn't even say honor your mother and father when they deserve it. It is a statement, honor your mother and father. So we go from our teenage years of our own rebellion, quite frankly, not to mention the fact that during that time we see that all of a sudden, oh, there are no perfect moms, there are no perfect dads. And then we get married, and then we have these little babies that think we hung the moon, and we blossom under the children, the babies, the toddlers, unconditional love for us. And we're back having unconditional love, and we believe they're perfect. They're little angels. They wouldn't do anything wrong. But we raise these little angels up listening to the criticism of our own mom and dad. And then we don't understand why later on they criticize us. And it's an endless cycle I see. It's an endless cycle that I see. And it's like, I can be talking to some parents that will be saying, well, I don't know why they don't have a good relationship with their grandparents. Well, you've taught them not to have a good relationship with their grandparents. You've taught them that criticism is the way we behave when it comes to grandparents. You see what I'm saying? And here it is. People will oppress each other, man against man, neighbor against neighbor. Young people will insult their elders, and vulgar people will sneer at the honorable. I mean, even in our own homes, we go to the grocery store and we walk around Walmart and we get in the car with our children or our grandchildren, and we make fun of that guy that was there in his pajamas, or we make fun of the woman who was there wearing what she was wearing. I mean, did I start this all out telling y'all that this causes me to reflect on myself, that God started dealing with me about my words? I went through a tough period of time with my own personal birth mother, my own time that I struggled. And I remember exactly what happened when I started realizing my mom wasn't perfect. Because I'm telling you, when I was little, I thought my mom was the smartest woman there was. I thought she hung the moon. And you know what? You go full circle. To this day, my mom's one of the smartest women I know, especially about money, common sense. I go back full circle. But those in between, once I discovered that my mom wasn't perfect and she made mistakes, and then heaven forbid somebody that you recognize is making mistakes corrects you, and how I rebelled against that, how I resented that. But you know what? During those years, I wasn't going to church. I wasn't a part of my youth group during those years. Earlier on, I was. And I wasn't going to Bible. I wasn't reading my Bible. I couldn't have even told you back then that the Bible said to honor my mother, not whether or not she's perfect or not. And the words of my mouth become the very curse that then permeates the relationships inside of our families. And then we wonder why. And all we want to do is blame it at them, the young. Oh, those kids, those filthy, rotten kids. I can't believe how they talk back to their mother, not realizing that they talk back to their mother because the mother talks the same way to the grandmother that way. Careful, careful, careful is what the Lord's telling me about the words that's coming out of my mouth. And the sad part is, in the areas where he points out to me specifically as I read this, are some of the places that I can't go back. He doesn't even want me to go back. He also doesn't want me to feel condemned. That's it, when he corrects us like that, it's not about condemnation. It is about the renewing of our minds. See, he is taking me to a place, and it's sad that I have to be in my 60s to do it. Y'all that are much younger than me, you have opportunities that I no longer have because I can't be your age again, to allow him to renew our minds. Oh, what I wouldn't give in the second full week after my birth daddy, my daddy, Buck Hildebrand's gone to heaven, what I wouldn't give to go back in those early years when I may have, or even some of the later years where I may have criticized him because he wasn't perfect, what I wouldn't give to take those back. Do you know how good it would feel to be able to sit here in this chair today and say, oh, you know what? I love my daddy. And even though I knew he wasn't perfect, I'm so happy to report to you guys that I never said anything but life things about him. I always spoke life to my daddy, and I always spoke life about my daddy. I can't say that. I can't say that I never criticized him, that I never questioned. Um, you guys know that in the latter years of his life, not the most recent past, but in his 70s, my dad developed a gambling addiction. I would love to tell you guys that I never, ever, ever said a word of criticism because he was gambling. I wish I could do that. I wish I could tell you that all I spoke was life. All I spoke was life. Now, I can tell you that I was far enough and mature enough in the Lord that I never, ever stopped believing that he had overcome that. And praise God, he did. Yeah. It's been on my heart for a long, long, long time as I've entered into, I guess, what they call the golden years. It's hard. Am I old enough to be the golden years? But anyway, into these golden years of watching these new babies being born and watching the adoration on the parents. Oh my gosh, especially that firstborn. I mean, we roll out the red carpet. We want the nursery to be just right. We're going to make sure we've got everything perfect. And oh my goodness, wash your hands before you touch my baby, and don't do this, and don't no, all the rules for that new mother. It's fun. I mean, I love it. My point is about they're just ate up with it. It's like this is and it is. You've heard me say it. I with everything in me believe we get to experience two miracles in our life for sure. For sure, two miracles. We get to experience the miracle of a brand new baby being born and the miracle of a believer going home. Those are two miracles that I think we get to experience in our life. So when a new baby is born, that awe and wonder is it's incomparable. But how does it quickly turn into, well, I love my kids this way and I adore my kids, but I have such disdain for my parents. That all in the same breath, oh, baby, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. I would die for you. And yet we forget that our parents feel this. Because in my 60s, I feel the same way about my babies as I did the day where they were born. They're still all that in a bag of chips to me. And grandbabies, don't even get me started. We don't have enough time. It's already almost 9 o'clock. Oh, don't get me started about grandbabies. So my whole point in this, and the reason I shared this, was we have a tendency, or I have a tendency to read these chapters about judgment for turning away from God with this little judgmental attitude of, oh, they were so bad back then. And then if I'm not careful, I go about my day-to-day life going, oh, this generation is so bad. It's all judgment, and it's unrighteous judgment. Instead of letting this speak to me right now today on September the 9th, 2022, and let it be what it's intended to be, and that is the Word of God that renews my mind so that I can think more like God thinks and see things the way He sees things than good old Elizabeth. Because good old Elizabeth isn't good on her own. There's nothing good about Elizabeth except the righteousness of God that's inside of her. Mary, I've got a note on the screen that says, "Hi, Buck's wife. God bless you with love. My prayers are with you." And that's from Lynn Miller Walters. Mom says, "Thank you very much." Thanks to all of you guys. The donations to our ministry, the donations, Barry Udall for my daddy, the hundreds of notes and texts and private messagings that I got. I can't thank you enough. We can't thank you enough. It was an outpouring that was just unbelievable. So anyway, then I could go into the Corinthians, I guess. I will. I'll just have a couple of statements. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 4. You happily put up with whatever anyone tells you, even if they preach a different Jesus than the one we preach, or a different kind of spirit than the one you received, or a different kind of gospel than the one you believed. And then Paul himself, who has the reputation even today as being the greatest apostle of all apostles, says these words, "But I don't consider myself inferior in any way to these super apostles who teach such things." He's warning us. He's warning us. And here is the deal with that. If we're not in this word every day, we won't even know that we're listening to a super apostle that's teaching us the wrong things. If you're not in this word every day, you're not going to know that you're being led astray. You won't know. You won't know what God said. God is very specific about right and wrong. He wrote it down for us so that there is no doubt what's right and what's wrong. Goes on to say in verse 14, even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it's no wonder that his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. I mean, that is such an amazing warning for us. Mm-hmm. In the end, they will get the punishment their wicked deeds deserve. One of the things that really I struggle with at times is being around believers and all they want to do is criticize other churches or criticize other pastors. Or we got the warning that we're not to believe false teachings, and we have the word so that we know what is false. But we catch ourselves criticizing other teachers, preachers, ministers when we don't even know what they're teaching or preaching or saying. But by golly, there's a reputation around town that says that church is a cult. And unless you've sat in that church yourself for a length of time that you can truly know, one Sunday's not going to tell you. Again, the power of our words. The power of our words. Here's the deal with that as well. There is no perfect church. And that church over there that they have a tendency to call a cult may have things that's not good. But so does that church, and so does that church, and so does that church. Because of all places that we should not expect perfection, it should be our churches. Jesus himself said, "I didn't come for those that are well. I came for the sick." And it's the ones that are sick that then has the greatest desire to serve. Oh my goodness. I mean, I am a chief example of that. He saved a wretch like me. The least I can do is try to help somebody else. And so there I go in my brokenness, in my journey of healing and wholeness. And I step out and I want to help because he's done so much for me, but I'm still in the process of healing. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm open with you guys telling you that he's still teaching me about the words I speak. And yet I'm doing a worldwide ministry. I'm holding retreats all across the country. You know, I think back to some of the things I used to believe and say in the early years of doing my ministry, and it's like, oh, I was so uneducated. I had such a lack of knowledge on the true nature of God. Hi, Carrie Ann. I sure do love you too, sweetie. I'm still believing one of these days you'll get to come to our retreat. Anyway, the power of our words, the power of love. Perfect love covers a multitude of sins. See, when we're operating in the love of God, we will not be operating in the judgment of the world. There is a righteous judgment, but the righteous judgment is not used for guilt and condemnation. Righteous judgment is, first of all, to save ourselves, that I'm not deceived by some of those false teachers. Righteous judgment oftentimes will be used to lead and guide in love, not guilt, not condemnation, not a, oh, shame on you, I can't believe you. Anyway, that's what I got from this morning's reading. So on this fabulous Friday, September the 9th, I hope you guys will like and share our page and pray that I get it figured out how I change that name. I'm sure I must have done something wrong somewhere, but pray for me. Love you guys. Bye-bye.